Pendle Hill. The climb begins gently enough. A rolling hill in Lancashire, green pastures stretching into the horizon, sheep grazing on the slopes. Yet, as you ascend, the air changes. The breeze grows sharper, carrying with it the faint scent of earth and peat. Silence presses in, and every footstep seems to echo. This is Pendle Hill, a place forever stained by the shadow of witchcraft, trials, and death. Pendle is not merely a hill. It is a stage upon which one of England's darkest dramas unfolded. In 1612, the Pendle witch trials became legend. 12 people, mostly women, were accused of sorcery. Some confessed under pressure, others held to their innocence, but 10 were found guilty and hanged in Lancaster. Their names, Old Demdike, Alison Device, Elizabeth Southerns, still carry weight here, spoken in hushed tones by those who know the stories. The trials were brutal, driven by fear and suspicion. At the time, King James I was obsessed with rooting out witchcraft. Villagers, eager to save themselves, pointed fingers at neighbors. Poverty, envy, and old grudges became weapons. And in the end, the condemned were marched from Pendle, their fate sealed. But legend says their spirits never left. Visitors who climb the hill today often report a sensation that goes beyond ordinary unease. Some describe sudden gusts of icy wind on clear days. Others claim to hear whispers, snatches of conversation in voices too faint to place, as though carried from centuries past. A few even swear they've seen figures moving along the ridges at twilight, women in ragged shawls, watching silently before fading into the mist. Pendle's reputation grew with time. Locals spoke of livestock falling ill after someone crossed their path, or of strange lights dancing on the hillside at night. Farmers avoided certain spots, calling them cursed ground. Hikers tell of being overwhelmed by dizziness, forced to turn back. And ghost tours, popular today, often end with participants visibly shaken, pale faces, trembling hands, claiming they felt touched, pulled, or followed by something unseen. One of the most chilling accounts came from a modern paranormal group who staged a vigil near Malkin Tower, the home of Old Demdike. As they sat in silence, recording equipment began to fail. Batteries drained, static crackled across their devices. Then, faintly, a woman's voice was captured, pleading, desperate, repeating the word mercy. The group left, shaken to their core. Even skeptics admit Pendle has a presence that's hard to explain. The landscape itself seems alive with memory. The hill looms solitary and immense, casting long shadows that stretch for miles. At dusk, when fog coils around its base, the ground feels like it's holding its breath. And in the stillness, it's easy to imagine the condemned witches standing beside you, their stories pressed into the soil. Historians note that Pendle's legends aren't just about ghosts, they're about injustice. Many of those accused were poor, elderly, or disabled. In another time, they might have been left alone, but in an age of paranoia, they became symbols of evil. Their condemnation says as much about human cruelty as it does about superstition. Perhaps that is why the hill feels so heavy. It remembers the weight of fear and betrayal. Today, Pendle is both a tourist attraction and a shrine. Walkers climb for the view, ghost hunters for the thrill, historians for the truth. But nearly everyone who comes here leaves with the same impression: that Pendle is different, that its silence is not empty, but crowded, that something unseen lingers, watching. And as you descend, it is impossible not to look back. The hill looms behind you, dark against the sky, its slopes rising like a warning. You wonder if the whispers you heard were just the wind. You tell yourself the shadows were tricks of the light, but in your heart, you know this place is not finished. Pendle Hill holds its secrets tightly, wrapped in mist and memory. And for those who climb it, one question always remains. When you walk away, are you leaving the hill behind, or is the hill leaving with you? Tower of London. The River Thames flows dark and steady, its waters lapping against stone that has stood for nearly 1,000 years. Rising above it is a fortress that is both iconic and infamous, the Tower of London. Tourists may see a landmark, a jewel vault, a postcard image, but step inside its walls and the weight of history presses down, cold and relentless. This is no ordinary castle. It is a prison, a place of execution, and many believe one of the most haunted buildings in Britain. From its very beginnings, the tower carried a sinister aura. Built by William the Conqueror in the 1070s, it was a symbol of domination, stone carved into a warning. Over centuries, it grew into a labyrinth of walls, chambers, and towers. Within them, unfolded stories of betrayal, cruelty, and death. The ground here has drunk the blood of queens and courtiers, prisoners, and princes. And that blood, some say, still stains the air. Perhaps the most famous spirit tied to the tower is Anne Boleyn, the ill-fated second wife of Henry VIII. In 1536, she was accused of treason, adultery, and witchcraft. After a sham trial, she was brought to the Tower Green, where the French swordsman struck her head clean in a single stroke. Witnesses claimed her lips moved even after the blade fell. Ever since, her apparition has been reported countless times, drifting through the chapel where she lies buried, walking the corridors with a silent grace, and, most chilling of all, carrying her own severed head. Guards have spoken of icy drafts sweeping past them, followed by the faint scent of roses, Anne's favorite flower. But Anne is not alone. Another of Henry's wives, Catherine Howard, is said to haunt these walls. Dragged screaming to her execution after being accused of adultery, she supposedly escaped her guards long enough to race down the corridors of the tower. Even now, visitors claim to hear her desperate cries echoing through the stone. Her final plea, forever unanswered. And then there are the princes in the tower, Edward V and his younger brother Richard. Imprisoned by their uncle, Richard III, they vanished one night in 1483, never to be seen again. Bones discovered centuries later beneath a staircase suggested their grim fate. Yet, their small figures have been spotted wandering the battlements, hand in hand, pale and silent. Guides have spoken of a sudden chill, followed by the unmistakable image of two children dressed in medieval garb, staring with wide, sorrowful eyes before fading into the stone. The tower's haunted legacy stretches far beyond royalty. Soldiers executed on Tower Green, prisoners tortured in the dungeons, nameless figures thrown into Traitor's Gate. All of them are said to linger. One chilling tale tells of a guard on night watch who challenged a phantom figure near the Martin Tower. When the figure did not respond, the guard lunged forward, only to have his weapon pass through thin air. Moments later, he collapsed in terror and died shortly after. Even animals are said to haunt the tower. For centuries, it housed the royal menagerie: lions, bears, even an elephant once gifted by the King of France. Today, visitors report ghostly roars in the dead of night, or the fleeting vision of a bear rushing from the shadows, only to vanish before impact. One soldier was said to faint in fright after such an encounter. What makes the tower so unnerving is not just the variety of ghosts, but the sheer density of them. Nearly every chamber has its tale. In the Salt Tower, scribbled carvings by imprisoned Catholics still mark the stone, and visitors feel sudden surges of despair. In the Bloody Tower, where Guy Fawkes and others were tortured, screams are sometimes heard. Even the Jewel House, home to the crown jewels, has its share of inexplicable footsteps and sudden chills, as if those who once coveted the treasures have never truly left. Modern paranormal investigators have tried to capture the tower's mysteries, but the results only deepen the unease. EVPs record faint voices pleading for freedom. Motion detectors trigger in empty rooms, and guards, seasoned by years of service, still admit to feeling watched on lonely patrols, the ancient stones alive with memory. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the tower is how ordinary its hauntings feel. There are no theatrics, no grand displays, just the quiet certainty that someone or something is there. A flicker of movement at the corner of your eye, a hand brushing your shoulder when you're alone, a child's laugh echoing down a corridor that hasn't heard laughter in centuries. For nearly a millennium, the Tower of London has been a stage for power, cruelty, and betrayal. Its stones are soaked with human history, bloody, sorrowful, unfinished. To walk its halls is to walk among ghosts, whether you believe in them or not. And as you stand on Tower Green, the site of countless executions, you may feel the weight of every gaze that ever fell here. Anne, Catherine, the princes, the countless nameless souls, they are not gone. They are part of the tower now. So when night falls and the gates close, imagine yourself standing inside, alone, the Thames whispering against the walls, the air turning colder, and from the shadows a figure steps forward, silent, waiting. Because in the Tower of London, history does not rest. It lingers, and it watches. Edinburgh's underground. Beneath the bustling streets of Edinburgh, beneath the laughter of pubs and the steps of tourists, lies another city. Narrow alleyways sealed off centuries ago, stone rooms buried in darkness, homes where families once lived and died. This is Mary King's Close, a place frozen in time, where history whispers through the walls and shadows cling to every corner. In the 17th century, Edinburgh was a crowded, filthy, and dangerous city. The Closes, narrow lanes running off the Royal Mile, were packed with tenements, stacked high with families crammed into rooms barely big enough for one. Disease spread quickly, and when the plague struck in 1645, Mary King's Close was devastated. Entire households were sealed inside, left to face sickness, starvation, and death. The cries of the dying echoed beneath the cobblestones, silenced only by the final toll of the plague bell. When the plague ended, the city turned away from the Close. Streets were built over its roofs, entombing the old alleys in shadow. For centuries, the space beneath lay hidden, a ghostly reminder of Edinburgh's darkest days. But the silence did not last. Visitors who ventured underground spoke of strange sensations, sudden cold, the brush of invisible hands, and faint voices calling in the dark. One figure in particular has captured imaginations, the ghost of Annie, a child said to wander the close. According to legend, she was abandoned by her family during the plague, left to die alone in the dark. Centuries later, a psychic visiting the site claimed to encounter her spirit, a small girl weeping for the loss of her doll. Since then, visitors have brought toys and gifts, piling them in one of the underground rooms. But many who leave offerings describe something unsettling. A sudden shift in the air, a hand tugging at their clothes, the faint sound of sobbing from a corner where no one stands. Mary King's Close is not alone in Edinburgh's haunted legacy. Above, looming over the city, stands Edinburgh Castle, an ancient fortress that has witnessed battles, sieges, and executions. Its dungeons once held prisoners of war who carved desperate graffiti into the stone. Guides speak of a phantom piper boy sent into the tunnels beneath the castle centuries ago to map their paths with his music. The sound of his pipes suddenly stopped, and he was never seen again. To this day, faint piping is said to drift up through the rock, especially on still nights, a reminder of a boy lost forever in the dark. The castle is also home to its own spectral figures, the Grey Lady, gliding silently through the chambers, soldiers marching in unison, heard but never seen, and prisoners who appear in cells long since emptied. Even animals are said to haunt these walls, phantom dogs in the old pet cemetery, their barking echoing in the silence. But it is the underground city that lingers in the mind. The chambers of Mary King's Close are oppressive. The walls drip with damp. The air is heavy with the scent of earth and mildew. Visitors often describe the feeling of being watched, as though hundreds of unseen eyes track their every movement. In one chamber, people report sudden difficulty breathing, as though the plague victims' final gasps still fill the room. In another, shadows shift unnaturally, clinging to corners even when torches shine directly upon them. Paranormal investigators have flocked to the site, eager to document its mysteries. Recorders have captured faint voices, children crying, women murmuring prayers, men groaning in pain. Photographs reveal strange streaks of light or faces in the dark. One group claimed to see a figure dart across the corridor, only for their cameras to show nothing but an empty passage. Yet what unsettles visitors most is not the evidence, but the experience. Guides warn of sudden drops in temperature, of unseen touches, of emotions that overwhelm for no reason. Some tourists break down in tears, gripped by despair that vanishes the moment they leave the close. Others flee in panic, refusing to descend again. Historians argue that the haunting power of Mary King's Close lies not only in ghost stories, but in the reality of its past. Hundreds of lives ended here in misery and fear. Their suffering was sealed beneath the city, hidden but never erased. And in the silence of the underground, where daylight never reaches, that history feels present, alive, pressing against you with every step. Edinburgh has earned a reputation as one of the most haunted cities in the world, and its underground is the beating heart of that legend. The closes, the castle, the buried streets, they are reminders that the past is not gone, only hidden. To walk here is to walk in two worlds at once, the modern city above and the shadowed city below. And when you leave, stepping back into the light of the Royal Mile, You may feel relief, but only for a moment, because the sensation lingers, a hand that brushed yours, a whisper at your ear, a shadow that followed too closely. Edinburgh's underground does not let go easily. So if you ever descend into Mary King's Close, remember, the silence is never empty. It is filled with centuries of whispers, with stories unfinished, with shadows that wait in the dark. And once you hear them, they are never truly gone. Pluckley Village. At first glance, Pluckley looks like the picture of English charm. Timber-framed cottages line winding lanes, gardens bloom behind low stone walls, and the countryside stretches out in peaceful green. But beneath the postcard, beauty lies something else entirely. For centuries, Pluckley has carried a title that few would envy: the most haunted village in England. Its reputation does not rest on a single story, but on many. More than a dozen distinct spirits are said to wander here, so many that no corner of the village feels untouched. One of the most famous is the Watercress Woman, a beggar who once made her living gathering cress from the streams. One night, her pipe set her clothes aflame, and she burned to death near Pinnock Bridge. Today, she is seen as a figure shrouded in smoke, flickering like firelight before fading into the dark. Some who pass the bridge report the smell of burning, even on still nights. Not far away, at Fright Corner, another spirit waits: the Highwayman. Local lore tells of a robber ambushed and run through with a sword, his body pinned to a tree. His ghost leaps from the shadows, startling travelers, then vanishes before their eyes. Witnesses describe the sudden glint of steel, the rush of movement, and the silence that follows. The churchyard of St. Nicholas adds its own mournful presence. Here drifts the Red Lady, cloaked in scarlet, said to search for the grave of her stillborn child. Some see her kneeling by a headstone, her face hidden in grief. Others glimpse only a streak of red disappearing among the yews. The White Lady, linked to the Deering family vault, is also seen gliding through the grounds, her form faint as mist. The village has darker tales still. Near the site of old brickworks, a screaming man is said to cry out in agony, the spirit of a worker crushed by clay. Villagers claim the sound travels on the wind, piercing in its intensity, fading only when you near the spot of his death. In other lanes, phantom dogs are seen, their eyes glowing as they prowl the night. A ghostly coach and horses clatter through the village, heard long before seen, and gone without a trace. Inside the Black Horse Inn, hauntings take on a quieter but no less eerie tone. Glasses move on their own, footsteps echo upstairs, and staff often feel watched. The pub may be warm and inviting by day, but after dark it belongs to older, unseen guests. Paranormal investigators who visit Pluckley leave with stories of their own. Recorders capture disembodied voices, faint laughter, whispered words. Cameras reveal streaks of light or figures that should not be there. Even skeptics admit the atmosphere is strange. The air grows heavy, the silence charged, as though the village itself is holding its breath. What sets Pluckley apart is not just the number of ghosts, but the density of them. Walk down one street and you may encounter a highwayman, a grieving mother, and a phantom coach, all tied to the same small patch of earth. It feels less like a village with a few hauntings, and more like a village where the veil between worlds has grown thin. Stand in Pluckley at midnight, and the quiet becomes oppressive. Shadows stretch across the cobblestones, windows seem to watch, and the hedgerows whisper with movement. You tell yourself it's just the wind, just the night playing tricks. But as you walk on, the sense grows stronger. That you are not alone, that you have stepped into a place where the dead are never far behind. Pluckley is not simply haunted. It is saturated with hauntings, its history etched into every lane, its shadows crowded with restless figures. And when you leave, driving away into the countryside, you may glance in the mirror and wonder if something came with you. Just another traveler on Pluckley's endless, haunted road. Blickling Hall and Chillingham Castle. In Norfolk, among quiet fields and rolling woodland, rises the striking Jacobean mansion of Blickling Hall. By day, its red brick walls and elegant gardens paint a picture of grandeur. By night, the atmosphere shifts, the air grows heavy, the corridors echo, and shadows stretch in ways that seem almost deliberate. For centuries, this has been tied to one of England's most tragic queens, Anne Boleyn. Executed at the Tower of London in 1536, Anne is said to return not to the scene of her death, but to the home of her youth. Each year on the anniversary of her execution, locals tell of a ghostly coach racing up the long drive. Black horses foam at the mouth, their eyes glowing like embers, while a headless driver whips them forward. Inside sits Anne herself, pale and silent, her severed head resting in her lap. The coach vanishes at the doors, but Anne lingers, wandering the hallways in a white gown, her figure seen gliding through rooms where she once lived. Her father, Sir Thomas Boleyn, is also cursed in local legend. Condemned to ride across Norfolk for 1,000 years, he is said to thunder through the countryside on horseback, pursued by ghostly hounds. Witnesses speak of the sound of hooves on empty roads and the echo of chains rattling in the night. The Boleyn name, once tied to ambition and downfall, seems bound forever to sorrow. Inside Blickling, the hauntings feel almost woven into the fabric of the house. In the library, visitors report sudden chills, as though unseen hands are rifling through forgotten books. On the grand staircase, footsteps follow close behind, only to fade when you turn. Even in brightly lit galleries, staff have felt the unmistakable sensation of being watched. Travel north to Chillingham Castle in Northumberland, and the atmosphere grows even darker. Its name alone carries a warning, and its history justifies it. Once a medieval stronghold, Chillingham witnessed centuries of bloodshed, raids, executions, and imprisonment. Today it is infamous as one of Britain's most haunted castles. The best-known spirit here is the Blue Boy. For centuries, guests spoke of cries echoing through the Pink Room at midnight, followed by a flash of blue light. Then, in the early 20th century, the bones of a boy and scraps of blue cloth were discovered behind a wall. Since that grim revelation, the sightings have diminished, but visitors still describe the eerie sensation of a child's presence, near but never seen. Chillingham's other ghosts are equally unsettling. The White Lady drifts through the chapel, her sorrowful figure vanishing as suddenly as it appears. In the dungeons, where prisoners once starved in chains, moans are still heard. Some visitors collapse in tears for no reason, overwhelmed by emotions that seem to belong to someone else. The torture chamber may be the most disturbing of all. Tourists stepping inside describe a suffocating dread. Chains clink, shadows shift, and some swear they feel unseen hands gripping their shoulders. The instruments of torment still stand on display, reminders of cruelty that seems to echo across centuries. What unites Blickling and Chillingham is the way grandeur amplifies the hauntings. These are not remote cottages or forgotten ruins, but noble houses built for power and prestige. Yet behind their facades lie stories of tragedy and despair. Anne Boleyn's restless return, the cries of a boy bricked alive, the sorrow of women in white. They remind us that even the grandest halls cannot silence the past. Stand at Blickling's gates on a May night, and you may hear the rattle of phantom wheels. Walk the halls of Chillingham, and you may feel the weight of eyes in the dark. Both places prove the same chilling truth. Stone may endure, but memory endures longer. And if you visit, ask yourself, are you a guest of the living or an audience to the dead? Theatre Royal Drury Lane. When the stage lights dim and the final curtain falls, theatres usually settle into silence. But in London's Theatre Royal Drury Lane, the night is far from quiet. Shadows linger in the aisles, phantom footsteps echo across the boards, and a chill drifts through the velvet seats. This isn't just London's oldest working theatre. It is also one of its most haunted. Drury Lane has stood for centuries, rebuilt after fires, reshaped by architects, yet always alive with performance. But alongside the glamour and applause, a darker cast of characters has refused to leave. Actors, stage hands, and even audiences speak of presences that haunt the theatre as persistently as any long-running play. The most famous is the Man in Grey. He appears in powdered wig, cloak, and boots, drifting through the upper circle before fading into a wall. Generations of actors have called him a good omen, believing that his presence blesses a production with success. Yet the truth is chilling. During 19th century renovations, builders discovered a skeleton sealed inside the theatre's walls, a dagger wedged between its ribs. Many believe the Man in Grey is that murdered soul, doomed to wander the theatre forever. He is not the only ghost here. Drury Lane is crowded with stories. Actors rehearsing alone on the stage hear faint applause from an empty house. Stagehands report seeing a pale figure seated in the royal box, vanishing when approached. Even the laughter of a ghostly clown is said to echo backstage, light-hearted at first, but with a sharp, unsettling edge that leaves witnesses uneasy long after the sound fades. The theatre's history explains its spectral roll call. Earlier incarnations of the building were destroyed by fire, claiming lives in the chaos. Actors collapsed mid-performance, their deaths woven into the stage's story. Stagehands perished in accidents with the massive machinery above. Every tragedy, every final gasp seems to have soaked into the wood, the stone, the velvet, fuel for hauntings that refuse to fade. What makes Drury Lane so disturbing is the subtlety of its ghosts. They rarely roar or rage. Instead, they appear in quiet, almost ordinary ways. A breath on the neck in a dressing room, a flicker of movement in the wings, a whisper of dialogue from a long-forgotten play. The theatre seems less haunted by isolated spirits than by an entire company, an endless troupe performing between the shadows. Investigators who have tested the building describe strange evidence, recorders catching muffled voices, cameras blurring inexplicably, motion sensors triggered in locked rooms. But perhaps the most convincing proof is the sheer consistency of the tales. From the 18th century to today, performers, workers, and visitors alike repeat the same experiences, as though the theatre itself has rehearsed its ghosts as carefully as any play. Even in daylight, the presence is felt. Dressing rooms grow suddenly cold. Mirrors reflect fleeting faces that do not belong. Doors slam, curtains shift, and staff admit that certain corridors are avoided whenever possible. It is as if Drury Lane's ghosts are not confined to the stage, but permeate the entire building. Actors who never left, stories that never ended. Imagine standing alone under the spotlight, the house before you, black and silent. Then, faintly, comes the shuffle of movement, the rustle of fabric, the unmistakable sound of someone breathing in the stalls. You strain to see, but the seats are empty. And yet, you know you are not alone. Theatre Royal Drury Lane is more than a stage. It is a mausoleum of memories, a place where applause and anguish are bound together, where history refuses to let go. Its ghosts are not curiosities. They are reminders that performance never truly ends. Here, the show goes on, whether the audience is living or dead. And when the curtain falls, the silence doesn't last. At Drury Lane, the theatre always whispers back,